Oh, what a day. What a lovely day. I'm the man who grabs the sun. Riding to Valhalla. Witness me, blood bag. Witness. I live. I die. I live again.
Great job.
That's the best I can do. When he screams riding to Valhalla, it's like absolutely unhinged.
It is.
I can't believe that. I saw a Letterboxd review that was like a supporting character gets 3 of the most iconic lines in a movie in 30 seconds or something.
It's true. To be fair, I think the titular character of this film speaks maybe 10 lines across the entire 2 hours. So
yeah. Welcome to Your Pick, the film podcast. I'm Tatum.
And I'm Geneva.
We are 2 friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. All right, we are back for another fun, exciting, enthralling episode for our listeners. Get ready, everybody. It's going to be a fun time. Yes, we are on our way to the green place.
We're on the hunt.
We will we will fight against every obstacle in our path before we turn around and come back.
I think the real green place was the friends we made along the way.
God. Indeed. But before we embark on this treacherous
journey to the gates of Valhalla.
Yes. Why don't you share with us what you've been watching, Geneva?
Okay. All right. What have I been watching? Well, Tatum, you'll be pleased to know that I watched a few more episodes of The Leftovers.
Ooh, okay.
Yes. I am close to the end of the season 2 now. I have gotten to the episode where police guy, what's his face, is basically having a full-on, like, I'm sort of in between death and life, and I'm hanging out in a hotel trying to figure out what to do.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
For anyone who is not familiar with The Leftovers, it's that kind of show.
Go watch it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Yay. Yeah, that's when the show really starts to leave. And I mean, not that the show really exists in reality the whole time, because the concept of people disappearing is kind of fantastical. But at this episode, that's when it really starts getting super fantastical, because by the time you get into the 3rd season, it's like, whoa, what's going on? Anyway, I'm glad you're watching it.
Thank you. And then I rewatched a couple of movies this week. I rewatched A Letter to Three Wives, which I think I talked about in the podcast several months ago, because I actually watched it for the first time not too long ago. It's the movie that Joe Mankiewicz won a whole bunch of Oscars for the year before he then won a whole bunch of Oscars for All About Eve. And it's a fantastic movie. I highly recommend it to anyone who has not seen it yet. I rewatched a movie called Austenland, which I had watched way years ago. I don't know if I was in a bad headspace or something, because when I tried to watch it before, I was really not feeling it. I was kind of bored, kind of cranky, but I rewatched it this time with my roommate, and we had an absolute ball. So this movie Austenland, the premise is that it's an American woman played by Kerry Russell who is absolutely obsessed with Jane Austen, specifically with Pride and Prejudice, and her entire room is decorated to look like some sort of Regency tea house, and she has a giant cardboard cutout of Colin Firth that she kisses every morning as she's going to work, and all this stuff.
This sounds like a Geneva movie.
It is very much. So basically she decides that she's going to treat herself, because her life kind of sucks. She's going to treat herself to a trip to England to do basically a week-long LARPing experience that's all, Jane Austen Regency themed. And so she's there, and she meets all the different she's basically sort of because she's not very rich, she was only able to buy basically the poor relation package where she doesn't get all the amenities and she has the ugliest clothes. And so it's very much the sort of the heroine experience. And there's a couple different guys who are there. And, there's all these questions of, this is a LARPing experience. Are they just acting or are we really into each other? Which one should I pick? It's really, really dumb. And I loved it so much. It has so many Easter eggs for people who love Jane Austen, such as myself. Jennifer Coolidge is in it playing like every like stereotype of the loud, obnoxious American, but she's so funny and adorable that you just can't help but love her. Georgia King, who is a British actress that I've never really loved before, she is so freaking funny in this movie. Just playing this sort of ditzy, posh girl who doesn't really understand what's going on. JJ Field and Brett McKenzie are the two love interests who are both very attractive. And yeah, if you enjoy period dramas, if you enjoy comedies, rom-coms, like give this one a try. It's really silly.
I kind of want to watch it. It sounds great.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's good. I think it's on Max right now. I think that's how I watched it.
Nice.
Let's see. Oh, and then the last one that I wanted to mention is a Denzel Washington movie from the 90s called Devil in a Blue Dress, which I absolutely loved this movie. It is a film noir set in the late 40s. It's an adaptation of I believe the first book in a long-running series about a black man in 40s through 60s Los Angeles who, he's trying to get by in a very racist and oppressive time, and he kind of works part-time as an unofficial private eye, basically. So it's a classic film noir, but with the added twist that the hero is a black man in 1940s Los Angeles. And it's a really, really good movie. Denzel Washington is great, as he always is, but there's some really great supporting performances from Don Cheadle, and Jennifer Beals plays the sort of femme fatale character. And it looks amazing. The costumes are all wonderful. The plot has a lot of great twists and turns, some really memorable performances and sequences. And yeah, if you love film noir, I really, really recommend Devil in a Blue Dress. Have you ever seen it, Tatum?
No, it's been on my list for a very long time.
Okay. It's on Amazon Prime at the moment. That's where I watched it.
Okay, so. Cool.
Yeah.
I need to make sure I actually watch that, because Amazon Prime, I feel like more than any other streaming service that I have experience with, they will put things on there and then take them off so fast. Because I put things on my list all the time and I'm like, I'll watch it. And then 2 weeks later, it's gone. So,
yes. Well, this is one like that. I had put it on several months ago and then it was off for a couple months and then it just got added again. So yeah, that's why I watched it.
So strange. I don't understand how and why Amazon does the
very
things
annoying.
That they do. But anyway, okay, that's a great list of movies. It sounds like you had a really great week of watching stuff. That's awesome. I have not watched, I'm looking at my Letterboxd. I have actually not watched anything I haven't watched anything since our last episode, other than I will say Geneva and I were initially planning on recording an episode for a 2023 film called Society of the Snow, which is on Netflix. A lot of people rate this movie very highly. It's been on a lot of top 10 lists of the year 2023.
Including me. This is a really, really good movie.
Yes. I started the film. I was quite interested to see it and wanted to record it for the podcast. I got a half hour in and had to stop. I literally felt like I was going to vomit. Even in those 30 minutes that I saw, I would say that if you are able to stomach a story like this, please watch it. Because just in those 30 minutes, the acting is really great. The filmmaking is phenomenal. The character building, I could tell just from those 30 minutes that it is a very good movie. But I personally just could not. I couldn't do it.
It's a brutal story. Actually, since you brought it up, why don't I just talk about it from my perspective as someone who was able to watch it, and just in case there's someone out there who's interested. Yeah, it's definitely a brutal story. So
I wouldn't use the word brutal. I would use horrifying.
And
like nightmare-inducing and traumatizing.
It is a movie that is based on a true story about a Uruguayan rugby team who crashed in the Andes in the 1970s and spent basically 2 months having to survive before they were finally able to send out a party who was able to go and get them rescued. And like Tatum said, this movie is very unflinching in what it depicts. These boys, and I say boys, I mean most of them are sort of late teens, early 20s. Like they're not children, but they are fairly young. What they went through is horrific, and something that most of us, I think, could only imagine. They just the injuries, the ingenuity that they had to use to find ways to keep themselves warm and to supplied, and the ways that they, the different methods that they tried to go through in order to get themselves rescued. This movie it's very accurate to the actual experience of the survivors. There was a previous film that was made about this story called Alive back in the 90s, which I think I've heard some decent things about, but from what I understand, this movie is far more accurate. It's also in the Spanish language, which is very cool.
In an accent that I can't understand, by the way, which I found to be really interesting. The intro, kind of the intro monologue that just is overlaid over the mountains. I could understand that very clearly because it was slow, clear, describing the film. And I was like, oh, cool. I don't need subtitles. And then they started talking and I was like, oh my, this is not an accent that I'm familiar with.
That's cool. I haven't looked up to see whether they got actual Uruguayan actors or whether it's an actors from a variety of South American countries kind of doing an Uruguayan accent. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I mean, to me, as a non-Spanish speaker, it sounded
cool. Spanish
sounded great. Yeah. But anyway, all that being said, this is a fantastic movie, and the story itself is really beautiful and inspiring one, I think. It often gets sensationalized because there is, trigger warning for anyone who struggles with, hopefully everyone struggles with
I know,
this.
I'm like, what do you mean?
You're like, where are you going with this? All right. Trigger warning for anyone who struggles with, aspects of survival stories is, there is cannibalism that they have to do in order to survive. But
I would argue that cannibalism is not even the most horrifying part. Like watching people slowly die of freezing to death and injury and infection and that's worse to me than eating people, in my opinion. But
yeah, but all that is to say is, to me, this story is a really beautiful one about the relationships that these boys have for one another, that have been built up over years of them being friends and playing together as a team, the relationships that they have with their family and their friends back home, which motivate them to want to continue to survive and to continue to look for ways to be rescued even after it seems that all hope is gone. And there's some really fascinating conversations that they have with one another, as they're just hanging out in this icy valley.
Hanging out? You mean wasting away?
Waiting to see what is going to happen next, about just kind of spiritual conversations or philosophical questions of what is it that motivates us? Why do we choose to go on when all hope seems to be lost? What is it that we're living for? It's a really thoughtful, I think, film that's about this. It's not sensationalized in a way that this story often could be. And it is hard to watch at times, definitely, but I think there's also a lot that's rewarding about it. But, I also completely understand if you can't make it through. So all that is to say, I just wanted to speak, some positive words in this movie's favor. So you're not like,
well, I mean, I didn't
just scaring people
I didn't
off.
speak negatively. Like, I think
No,
it's a
you're just
very
speaking,
good
like,
movie.
This movie is the most horrifying.
Like, I started out by
ever
saying,
seen.
it's one of the top movies of 2023, all of that stuff. Like, it's a good film. And the fact that I could tell it was a good film even from the first 30 minutes, I think is a testament to how good the movie is.
Yeah.
It's just torturous to watch.
Well, I mean, the strange paradox is, so, for anyone out there who's considering whether or not to watch it, your mileage may vary. Do your own research, figure out what works for you, what doesn't. Tatum is way more able to sit through horror movies than I am. I'm such a scaredy cat when it comes to horror movies. I'm trying to get better, but it's hard for me. But I was fine watching this film. Not fine and like,
I feel like you can't compare this to a horror movie, though. They're not.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say that, like, if you're a person who can be delicate when it comes to something that is more of a horror movie genre, you may still be able to get through this film. But on the other hand, you could also be someone who can sit through something in the horror genre and not be able to get through this film. So I'm just saying, do your research, watch the trailer, figure out what will what will work for you and what won't.
Yeah.
But
yes. Anyway.
Yeah.
Moving on from that,
yes.
I wish we could have done a whole episode on it, but I will never watch that movie in its entirety in my life.
It's all good.
All good. But anyway, moving on from that, so I'm just going to go ahead and start talking about Mad Max Fury Road. I just want to start by saying this movie. So first of all, this movie doesn't really have a plot. It has a plot, but it's very, very simple.
They go in one direction and then they go in another.
Yep. So honestly, one of the things that that intrigues me the most about this film is the story behind how it was made and how it was shot. And so all of that to say, I have a lot of research to start off this conversation. When it gets towards the end, I will just be straight up quoting directly from Wikipedia because, again, I don't get paid for this. I have a real job. I don't have time to paraphrase and rewrite.
As long as you cite your sources.
Exactly. So the first little bit, I kind of paraphrase and wrote myself, but then when we get to the direct quotes, I'll just be like, hey, this is Wikipedia. Also, this might not be the best written. So if anyone's wondering, I'm back at work. The strikes are over. Here we go. Back to limited brain capacity, Tatum. Anyway, all that being said, okay, today on the show, we will be discussing the non-stop action thrill ride Mad Max Fury Road, released in 2015. The film, directed by George Miller, follows Furiosa, Max, and Immortan Joe's most prized breeders as they travel across the desert in pursuit of a future in the green place. When they arrive, only to find that the hope that they've been seeking is long gone, they decide to turn around and return to the Citadel to overthrow the status quo and give water back to the people. It's a pretty vague plot description, but
that's it.
That's it.
You got it all.
So, a sequel to the first three Mad Max films that were released in the 1970s and 80s, the idea for Mad Max Fury Road originated in the year 1987. However, due to decades of complications, principal photography did not start until 2012, which led to the eventual release in 2015. And surprisingly, despite this movie being a huge box office success, it still suffered a loss of $20 to $40 million due to the high amount of money that was invested in marketing costs on top of just the general production budget. So I found that to be interesting, that this movie made a lot of money, but even so, they were in the negative by quite a significant amount. But it doesn't matter because they've already greenlit the next film. So apparently the studio's still down with it. Probably the 10 Oscar nominations and like 8 of the 10 wins motivated them to fund another one. But anyway, due to the extensive delays in production, Mel Gibson could not play the role of Max as he had become controversial and too old over time. And by the time the land...
Controversial is a very delicate way to put it.
I'm trying to be diplomatic here, you know?
Yep.
Yep. Don't want to alienate anybody. I'm losing my mind. Okay. But by the time they landed on Tom Hardy, a long list of actors had already been considered. Armie Hammer, Jeremy Renner, Michael Fassbender, Joel Kinnaman, Heath Ledger, Eric Bana, and even Eminem had been considered for this role.
Oh my gosh. I kind of want to see this movie with Eminem in that role now.
This is a crazy lineup. I feel like
there are some names on this list and I'm like, hell yeah. And then there are some that I'm like,
I feel like I could see...
Bullet dodged.
I could see Jeremy Renner. I could see Joel Kinnaman, and I feel like that's it. But
I could see Heath Ledger. That would have been cool.
Maybe. Honestly, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so yes. But in the years leading up to the actual shoot of Fury Road, Miller spent countless hours storyboarding. In fact, Miller completed the storyboard of the movie before even writing the screenplay. I think it was over 3,500 storyboard, squares or whatever you call them. So that's a lot. And actually they used all of the 3,500 storyboard clips that they had in the movie. So it was a very direct translation from the storyboard to the final product.
That's fan. I
guess this is what happens when you have 30 movies. There are 25 years to make a film. But so he was joined in the process by his co-writers Nico Lathouris and Brendan McCarthy, who also helped design many of the characters and vehicles. And Brendan McCarthy is actually like a world-renowned comic book writer and artist, so that's pretty cool. Also, this movie he'd planned on making like an anime version of this, like a cartoon version, and then he also planned on making a video game. Like this was all over the place.
I mean, all of these make a lot of sense.
Yes. I would highly recommend reading the entire Wikipedia page for this. There's so many tidbits that I couldn't put here because I didn't want to spend 45 minutes. Just read the Wikipedia page. But anyway, yes. So also later on, production designer Colin Gibson would come on board and join the group in designing more vehicles for the film, some of which were constructed as early as 2003, and all of which were fully functional. And in total, over 150 vehicles were constructed for this movie, and only 88 survived to the end of filming.
Surprised it was not less.
Well, the ones that were destroyed were intended to be destroyed. So like they had planned, these are the ones that are going to blow up. So yeah. And then also joining the crew was cinematographer John Seal, who came out of retirement to shoot this. And it was actually his first time shooting with digital cameras. So kudos to him. This movie looks great. So now I'll just get into some direct quotes from Wikipedia. So this is the first one. I found this one to be fascinating. So, I mean, I found the rest of these to be fascinating. But so this one says, quote, 90% of the effects in the film were achieved practically. Both the Doof wagon and the Doof warrior's guitar are fully functional, and none of his scenes were rendered using CGI, even when the guitar shoots fire. Second unit director and supervising stunt coordinator Guy Norris was in charge of over 150 stunt performers, some of whom were from Cirque du Soleil. End quote.
Okay. Two things that I have to say about that. First, I did not know that his name was the Doof Warrior.
If you go to the IMDb page...
I just thought he was like the guitar playing war boy. That is hilarious.
If you go to the IMDb page for this movie, all of the characters that are nameless all have names, and they're all crazy names.
Crazy.
Yes.
The second thing is I just have to very quickly read a short quote from Steven Soderbergh, which is one of my favorite quotes about anything ever.
Okay.
Which is him talking about how much he loves Mad Max Fury Road. And he says, I don't understand how George Miller does that. I really don't. And it's my job to understand. I don't understand two things. I don't understand how they're not still shooting that film. And I don't understand how hundreds of people aren't dead.
Oh my gosh. Honestly? Yeah. Crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So a few more quotes from Wikipedia. So this one says, so Miller actually recruited his wife, Margaret Sixel, to edit the film, which is cool. But she also had 480 hours of footage to edit. And apparently it took her 3 months to watch all of it before even beginning to edit. So,
oh my gosh,
that's insane. I'm glad that their marriage survived. But yes. And then another quote says, according to cinematographer John Seal, quote, something like 50 or 60% of the film is not running at 24 frames a second, which is the traditional frame rate. It'll be running below 24 frames because George, if he couldn't understand what was happening in the shot, he slowed it down until you could. Or if it was too well understood, he'd shorten it or he'd speed it up back towards 24. His manipulation of every shot in that movie is intense. I found that to be really interesting because watching that movie, I'm just like, how do you get this visual style of things feeling so fast but also real paced? It's just crazy. And so
yeah, well, there's that early scene of Max running through Immortan Joe's like, you know, cavernous hideout place where it's very clearly sped up, and it's not really that exact style. Isn't used a whole lot throughout throughout the rest of the movie, but it really sets the tone for what we're going to see here.
Yeah,
how just manic and frenetic it is.
Yeah, gosh, editing this movie. Yes. So continuing on, also from Wikipedia, sound designer Mark Mangini stated that he viewed the war rig as an allegory for Moby Dick, with Immortan Joe playing the role of Captain Ahab. As such, the mechanical truck sounds of the rig were layered with whale calls to provide a more animal-like quality, and when the tank is pierced with harpoons and milk sprays out, sounds of whales breathing from their blowholes were incorporated.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So fascinating.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
Go read the entire Wikipedia page for this movie. And then one of the last things is, although Miller was contractually obligated to deliver a PG-13 film, Warner Brothers decided to hold test screenings for two different versions, a studio cut and a Miller cut. The Miller cut tested better than the studio cut, so Warner Brothers decided to release the film with an R rating. Thank God. If this was a PG-13 rating, this movie would not be anywhere near as good.
I can't picture it. Yeah. Although at the same time, it's not like a really, like, I don't know, there's so much violence and so many explosions, but it's not a movie that I think of as being super gory. Like, some of the most gory parts very, very much happen off screen, or they're kind of obscured intentionally. So I could see how the original intention was PG-13, but it, you know, it definitely gets pushed over the line.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it doesn't go so far into the R rating that I'm like, why bother having it be a PG? Like, because the R is so tame, so just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the last thing that I saw on the Wikipedia page was that Tom Hardy actually really struggled while working on the film because he couldn't understand the vision, and so he was getting very frustrated. But apparently after the movie came out, he like released a big apology toward Miller, basically saying like, oh, I understand now, you're a genius, I have massive respect for you and what you do, which I thought was interesting. How I always like to hear how when actors work on something and they're like, I don't get it, and then afterwards when they see it all come together, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, this I can just imagine, you know, from what I've heard about this film, it was not an easy shoot. And, you know, you look at it and you're like, I can understand. They were in the desert with sand hitting their faces for however many months, like getting burnt and
no CGI. All of
chopped
it is practically done.
It must have been miserable. And if you're doing all of that and you don't understand what the director is thinking, or you don't have any confidence that it's going to turn out to be good, I can understand you'd be like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
You know,
it reminds me of a little bit, I mean, they're very different movies, but it reminds me a little bit of Everything Everywhere All at Once. How, you know, Michelle Yeoh has said she was reading that script and she was like, I have no idea what is going on. And they were filming it and she was like, I still have no idea what's going on. But then it came out and it all made sense.
Yeah. Quick question. I mean, I will definitely go and read the Wikipedia page after this, but did you see any interesting tidbits about how Charlize Theron got cast, or other ideas who were considered for that role or anything like that?
So from what I remember, there wasn't too much on her, but originally when they had planned on shooting this decades prior with Mel Gibson, they were considering doing it with Mel Gibson and Sigourney Weaver. Which would have been so great.
That would have ruled.
So great.
I mean, this current version rules too, but I really want to see that version now.
Yes, absolutely. And then I also saw that there were really no details on this on the Wikipedia page. It was just one sentence. So I don't know how reliable it is because I didn't go to the source of this, but there was something that said that Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron apparently did not get along well.
I
on set.
have heard this. Yes,
So-
this is a story that is told a lot about this movie.
Oh, what's the story? Because I don't know it.
Just that they did not get along. Apparently, they were, like Tom Hardy would show up late on set, and Charlize Theron would be upset about it. They would argue. I don't know the details, and I'm sure it's like the stress of the situation. Probably no one's at their best, and things can get sort of blown out of proportion in the aftermath too. I've heard that they did not get along well filming.
Well, I've never experienced that on a film set before.
I know, crazy.
Wow.
No one has ever argued with another person on a film set.
No, never. We're all so well behaved and compatible all the time.
Famously chill location.
Yeah. So that is all of my research. As far as discussion of this movie, Geneva, I'm totally fine with this. I don't even want to talk about the plot at all. I just want to talk about what are our favorite parts of this movie and what are the coolest parts, because so obviously this movie is my pick. I love this movie. I'd have to reevaluate this in my brain because there's a lot of action movies. Well, I was going to say this might be my favorite action movie. It has some strong competition with The Matrix. But anyway, it might not be my top, but it's in like my top 5, 100%. So I love this movie. It's absolutely fantastic. I think that it is a masterpiece that will most likely never be topped. I don't think Furiosa is going to be able to top this, the prequel. But who knows? Maybe it'll shock us. But yeah, I literally just want to talk about the parts that we like about this movie and what we think is cool. But before we do that, we can just talk about our relationships with the movie real quick. So this is a film where I don't remember why, because I've been very committed to seeing all the Best Picture nominees for like over a decade at this point. But I did not see this movie in theaters for some reason. And I remember deeply regretting it after the fact. I was like, what? Why did I not go see this in theaters? So I didn't see it in theaters, but I remember watching the Oscars and being like, whoa, this movie is sweeping. What is this? Where did this come from? So after that, I sought it out pretty quickly and I absolutely fell in love with it, which made me regret even more that I hadn't seen it in theaters. But I actually had the opportunity, I think it was last summer, the Music Box played Mad Max Fury Road. It was like one screening at the theater and I was like, I am going. And I went, and this movie is a masterpiece to behold on a large screen in a theater packed with people with loudspeakers all around you. This film is just such a unique experience. I feel like really, really unique and shocking in a good way. Action movies don't come very often. And so when they do come, I just feel like they need to be appreciated. And I'm glad that this film was appreciated because sometimes they're not, like Mission Impossible Fallout got basically no recognition whatsoever. Granted, they're very different movies, but so I love this film. I've seen this movie a fair amount of times, probably like 5 times at this point. And watching it again yesterday, I was like, this movie is so good. Every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. I find this movie also to be incredibly funny and very critical of bro culture, which I think is a really awesome subplot of just this idea of men just being devoutly worshipful to this concept of, I don't even know what it is, but just this whole made up thing of like, witness me, we witness you. And like the one guy was like, I had a baby brother, and he was perfect in every way. Like there's just, I just feel like there's so much. This is an incredible action film, but it also has commentary on feminism and, reasons for living and things like that are kind of at the core of it, which like grounds the film. But anyway, I love this movie. Those are my thoughts on it. That's my relationship with it. How about you, Geneva? I don't think you like this movie as much as I do, but I could be wrong.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I do really like this movie. I love that it exists. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change anything about it. It's not a movie for me, I will say, and that is completely a subjective taste, opinion. That's not a mark on the movie at all. Like I said, it's basically perfect in every way. It's just not my preferred flavor of action. But yeah, it's great. I'm really glad that I had a chance to see it a second time. I, like you, did not watch it in theaters. I don't remember why. I think this is kind of when I was first getting into watching all of the Oscar movies and I hadn't kind of fully committed to it. But I do remember that the circumstances of me watching it was the Oscars were happening that evening and I knew this movie was going to sweep. And so I was like, I need to see this movie before the Oscars happen. And so I rented it on Amazon.
Wow.
And I just squeezed it in 3 hours before the ceremony began. And so watching it in that sort of on a small laptop screen, feeling kind of hurried, and then the whole plot is they go in one way and then they go another. And it was not the most conducive atmosphere. Plus, after months of people being like, this is the greatest movie that was ever made, the expectations are sky high. And obviously this is a fantastic movie. Just, my first experience watching it was not great. But honestly, my experience watching it last night.
I understand that completely.
Thank you. But yeah, my experience watching it last night was much, much better. I'm really, really glad I had a chance to rewatch it. I had forgotten so much of it. It's it was all kind of a blur. My memories of my first watch. And so a lot of it to me was seeing it for the first time. And yeah, even though it's not, like I said, my vibe or my wavelength, there is so much that I really admire in it. Obviously, Charlize Theron is just a goddess. She's a queen. We all love her. This is one of the movies that really kind of elevated her to the next level. And, she's sort of kind of in that tradition of Sigourney Weaver in Alien or Linda Hamilton in the Terminator movies. She kind of is redefining what a female action hero looks like in the 21st century. She's incredible. I was very moved this time around with something that I hadn't really remembered from my first watch, which is the arc that I think his name is Nux goes on, the war boy played by Nicholas Hoult. His transformation is something that is really, really well done and really moving for a character who is, covered in white paint and is constantly trying to kill himself
and
basically
losing his boot.
Spraying himself with chrome. It was really fun to see too how all the wives are most of them, not all of them, but are people that I recognize from other projects. So I'm like, oh, I completely forgot that you were in this. Which is always fun. So this movie is it's overwhelming. I really do wish that I'd seen this especially for the first time in a movie theater. But if it ever is re-shown somewhere around me, I'd definitely like to go, because I feel like this is a movie you can really only fully appreciate if you see it in the theater.
How did you watch it yesterday? Did you watch it on a laptop screen again?
No, it's on, I think it was Max, actually. I watched it on HBO Max.
Okay, so you were able to watch it on a TV?
Yes,
okay.
On my TV, which is, it's a good-sized TV.
Okay. But
I'd love to see it on an actual big screen.
Yeah, when I saw it last year in theaters, I was like, it's so good with the score just kind of sweeping the whole room score, and it's great. Okay. I actually did not know any of that about your relationship with this movie, so that's super cool that I know that now. I'm seeing in my notebook, prior to Mad Max Fury Road, I'd written Society of the Snow. The only thing I put was the tension. This is horrifying. And then I stopped.
That's all you need to know.
Only to proceed and have 2 pages of notes for Mad Max Fury Road. Anyway, but all of my notes for Mad Max Fury Road are basically this moment.
Awesome.
That looks cool. This line is great. So, Geneva, do you want to start us off with one particular shot or moment or thing that you really like in this movie?
Let's see. Well, I guess we could start with the War Boys because, like I said, Nux was a part of the film that I hadn't remembered very well, and I really, really connected to this time around. And like you said, the whole War Boys culture is really fascinating, and this nice, like, sort of sci-fi satirical view of kind of sort of bro-y culture, but also I think just the soldier mindset. Like, this is pretty nerdy, but when I was watching this movie last night, I was reminded of this passage in War and Peace, which yes, I've read War and Peace. It took me like 4 years to read, but I loved it. But there's this one particular passage that really stuck out to me, which is this one character, you know, one of the 10 gazillion characters in War and Peace, who is, he's like a kind of late teens, and he's going off to like start his career in the Russian military. And at one point, you know, it's like, and it's tough, it's stressful. He's in his first battle and he gets wounded and he's frightened and, you know, freaked out and everything. But then he's in this group of soldiers when the Tsar rides by, and it's like, the way Tolstoy describes it, it's like he suddenly forgets everything. He forgets who he is. He's just caught up in this mass of soldiers who are all screaming their love of the Tsar. And it's just like he completely lost himself to everything, but feeling like he would do anything for the Tsar, you know? It's this culture and this sort of like physical presence that he's completely swept up by. And I felt like there's some of that in the War Boys, you know, this sort of like, if you want people to do things for you, create a whole culture around their devotion, give themselves something to sacrifice for, make yourself seem larger than life, and give themselves a sort of noble purpose in feeling like to die for you is to die for honor, and, you know, it's to gain this glorious reward. I mean, it's just basic human psychology, but it's so well kind of constructed and thought out in this film. You know, there's this whole, like, we just see little glimpses of, you know, he talks about the gates of Valhalla. You know, they have this whole mythology, this kind of Norse mythology that has been influenced, and the whole thing of spraying your face with chrome before you're about to go and kill yourself, basically, in the service of Immortan Joe is fascinating. The whole witness me thing is fascinating.
I love it so much.
It's so good. But yeah, thoughts on the War Boys culture and world building?
Yeah, I mean, well, I like that you talk about Immortan Joe, because I think that it's really interesting to compare kind of how people see him with what we see in the beginning, which is he's like a dying man, basically. He's like covered in infections. His skin is falling off. He can't breathe. He has to wear these like basically ventilator, you know?
Yeah. The amazing costume design of, he has this breastplate and backplate that are just, they're clear, but they're like, the shape is muscles. So when he has it on, it looks like he's muscly, even though he's not.
Yeah.
It's just such a good costume choice.
Yeah. I mean, good grief. All of the costumes in this movie, the costumes, the makeup, the production design, like all of it is so, I mean, you can tell that this movie was made over years and years and years, because it really is it's an entire world, an entire culture, like you were saying. And just, I feel like every single person, not even just person, but every single object that I see, I feel like has a history. And
oh my gosh, that one shot where they're going through the creepy salt place with all the crows, and you just see these people on stilts.
Are they people?
Anything else about them?
It's like, are they even
whatever
people?
They are, some creatures on stilts, and you don't learn anything else about them, but you're like, there's a whole lore behind these, whatever these things are.
I remember the first time I watched this movie, that was what I remembered about it. That, because this movie is so, it's so orange, you know, it's so orange. And then that scene, I mean, we have a few scenes where it's blue, but that scene in particular, it was just so drastically different from everything else. It was like a shock. And for me, as someone who is obsessed with fantasy and mythical creatures, it just like, I was watching that and I was like, wait a minute, is this actually a fantastical world? Because in the beginning, I'm just like, okay, so this is a post-apocalyptic world where obviously it's very different from the society that we live in now, but I could see us, you know, like I could see a culture like this existing post-apocalypse. But then once I saw these creatures on stilts, I was like, wait a minute, is this not even our world? And I love that it's just so briefly there, because like you and I were both saying, this movie, it's a very simple plot, but it's also not simple at all, because the world around it is so rich and so complicated. And I love that. It just feels so thought out. And, you know, whether it's the War Boys as a culture, or whether it's Nux having 2 tumors that he's named, or whether it's Furiosa having this skeleton arm painted on the side of her war rig, you know, there's all of these different things. And it's like, oh, I love
the whole the way that everyone has their own steering wheel, and when you leave the car, you take off the steering wheel and you carry it with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, and even just this concept of this, what was it, doof? Like this doof who plays the guitar? Like, who is that?
This doof over here. Yeah.
What is his backstory?
Why? What is his purpose?
How did he get this
job?
Party? Like, who came up with the idea for him to exist? Like,
I love how he's on these like bungee strings too. So as the car is careening along, he's just sort of like swaying from side to side. Like,
there's also one moment in the movie where you see him like sleeping. He's just like hanging and he's just like asleep. But yeah, it's just like every single person, and you even get this idea of these different tribes, right? Like they're the water tribe, and then you see the oil tribe, and then you see these people who, you know, she makes the bargain with for them to have clear passage and then blow up the, you know, it's like, who are all of these different people, and also how are they surviving, you know? And you meet the many mothers, who most of them are dead by now, but you meet them and it's like, how are they surviving out here, you know? And there's just so many questions that aren't answered, but it's almost beautiful that they're not answered, because it just makes you more engaged, and you believe more that like this is just a real world. And I love that.
A question, actually, I should have asked you at the beginning. Do you have any relationship with the prior Mad Max films, the Mel Gibson ones? Because I've not seen any of them. And I was wondering at the beginning, when Mad Max is having all of those flashbacks of people he couldn't save, I was wondering if those are clips from prior movies, or supposed to be characters that we've already met, if you've seen other movies, or if those are just completely kind of inventions for this particular movie.
Well, so I have not seen any of the prior films. I'm not particularly a big Mel Gibson fan, so I don't really like watch. The only movie I've seen him in is what's it called? What's the kilt one?
Braveheart.
And I don't like that movie. So we should do that movie on the podcast at some point. I have very strong feelings about that movie. Anyway, so yeah, I haven't seen any of the original ones, but my assumption is that these are not direct clips from the previous ones, but I would assume that the original films had this idea of him trying to save people from what was happening. And so, you know, we see him having regrets of, you know, leaving people behind, or whatever it might be, people that died because he thinks he didn't do enough or something like that, which I love that there's a backstory to him. I mean, ultimately, I think that this is Furiosa's movie, but I think that him having a story is very helpful as well, because then you understand more of his character arc and how Furiosa helps him along and how they help each other and things like that.
Yeah. Honestly, the way that Max, and, you know, again, from someone who has never seen any of the other Mad Max films, so I don't know if Max functions similarly in them. My impression is that he plays a much more active role in those films. But in this film, the way he functions within the story is fascinating, because he is basically he's just kind of a witness for all of it. You know, he doesn't drive the plot forward particularly. I mean, he certainly helps out at certain moments, but he doesn't have the narrative arc, and he's also not the one who's starting the story. He's just along for the ride the whole time.
And I also love, too, this movie kind of reminds me a little bit about 1917, in the sense that it starts and you think that you know who the main character is, and then something happens. It's like, oh, wait a minute. No, this movie's not about him, you know, because the whole opening portion of this movie is, which by the way, the opening shot is incredible of him just standing there next to his car, and, you know, the landscape is, and it's so orange and he just looks so cool. And then obviously we have him being captured, and we see how good of a fighter he is, and all of these things, and he's moving so quickly, and he's fighting off like dozens and dozens of people. And so I really like that intro to him of just establishing he is a capable man. He is someone who, you know, wants to fight against this leadership, but that's really all we need to know about him, you know? And it's just, man, it's so cool. Also, I love how we establish like his boot and his coat and his car, because throughout the movie, again, this movie is like, it's got jokes in there, because we see moments where he's like, that's my car, and just like, that's my jacket, you know. And he takes his boot back.
He gets
and all
so
these
mad
things.
that anyone else is driving his car.
I love it. So yeah, I don't know. He's a very reserved, contained guy, but you get the sense that the reason he is that way is because he's been through a lot and he just wants friends. But, you know, so you're right.
Yeah.
It was the friends we've made along the way.
It was the friends we made. It literally was the friends we made along the way.
Yep.
I love so much the fact that when he first meets Imperiosa, you know, he's trying to escape. You know, he's trying to like get out of these chains that he's in and find a way like to get out of the situation. And so he's like pointing a gun at them. He's issuing orders, you know, he's kind of holding them hostage. Very quickly, it's like, oh no, he's just going to be like their friend, and he's going to help them out. It's like they're kind of sitting in the same car, and then Furiosa's like, you know, I think I can trust this guy, so I'm going to ask him to like watch the wheel for me while I do something. Or I forget what exactly it is, but it's like, it's so natural the way he just slips into, no, I'm on your side and I'm going to help you out with whatever it is that you're doing, you know?
Yeah, but you also get a sense of like, he does have a lot of walls up, you know? And I think throughout the film, we slowly see them come down, you know, like we know they're going to come down, but
yeah, his initial impulse is to drive off and leave them all behind.
Yeah.
You know, it's only because of Furiosa's, like, you know, the way that she rigged the war rig that he can't. But once that possibility is taken away from him, you know, the walls start coming down pretty quickly.
And she also does tell him to, because he tells her, you know, we'll wait for them to come, and he can take his wives back, and he'll be so grateful that he'll let me go. And Furiosa's like, are you sure that he'll let you go? You know, this guy's kind of insane and not really trustworthy. And that's when he's like, okay, let's team up. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I want to kind of go back a little bit to what we were talking about with culture, because I just wrote down some notes here that I just want to like touch on, because again, this movie is so well realized and it feels like a real world, because I wrote down, because all of these things similar to like the creatures that are on those stilts in what used to be the green place, you know, we get these flashes of things that just tell us about this world, but we never go back to them. And so we have these scenes of, we learn about mother's milk, right? We see all these ladies in chairs, literally being milked, you know, and then we see, Immortan Joe's son, who's kind of an airhead, you know, drink this milk. He's like, oh, you know? And then we also have Immortan Joe running to see where his wives are. And he's running through this like plant crop room where we see them being, you know, so we learn like, okay, so there is food. There is kind of a system in place to water and feed people. He's just holding it hostage. And is that a good thing? Is he doing that for the goodness of the people to ration it? Or is he doing it to withhold it from the people? Like, we don't know.
I'll give you 3 guesses.
Oh, right. But then
the scene where he just like turns on the faucet basically, and these huge waterfalls flow down in like the most inefficient way possible.
So wasteful.
Like, that is not a good way to distribute water.
So wasteful.
But it's the most like, I am your you know, your God from on high, who's, you know, just dispensing water as I choose. And then he just turns it off, and like, that's it, that's your water for the week or whatever.
He also tells them when he does that, something along the lines of, don't don't become dependent on the water because it will control you.
I'm sorry. I'm a human being. I need water to survive.
We need water.
Forgive me my addiction to water.
But yeah, and then we have these moments of, we see these people that step on these kind of turbines in order to raise and lower this bridge. And then, I love this concept of blood bags, because you learn that all of these...
Ugh, no thank you.
All of these Immortan Joe's like followers and whatever, they're all sickly and they're all kind of dying basically, and they have these blood bags, and the way that they use them, the fact that they're even called blood bags, like that, this world has its own vocabulary,
Yeah. I love one of the things that allows Max to survive is he's a universal donor. His blood type is the universal donor, which makes him very valuable. And they tattoo the fact on his back.
Yep, totally. And then we also have, when they first kind of leave to go track down Furiosa and catch her, we see, they've got these people that are, again, what are these jobs? Why do they exist? I don't know. But there's all these people that are like drumming on these drums that are, and then we learn about the concept of how they call his wives breeders, like they're not his prized wives, they're his prized breeders. And again, just kind of the vocabulary of this world and the language of this world. So yeah, and we've already talked about the concept of witnessing and things like that, and this kind of cult that Immortan Joe has created around himself. But yeah, this world is just so well established, and I just think it's fascinating. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, and then we also get clips of the wives, and they have these chastity belts that they're taking off, so you get an idea of like they are property.
The chastity belt that are like they're designed to look like bear claws, basically. I don't know if you saw it when it fell down, but it's like, yeah, it's a little, yeah,
totally. I'm looking at my notes to see if there's any more of those. Oh my gosh. Okay, so just kind of getting into, I guess, more the design of the vehicles and things like that, but the devices that they invent for the vehicles. This concept of spitting oil into these things that make them go faster, and this concept of shooting harpoons and then dropping this kind of sand anchor to pull them back. And then, if the front of
my favorite is the giant, like, they look like pole vaulters who are just kind of like swaying, and then they drop down and kind of pluck you up from the driver's seat and pull you out.
Yeah. And then, if the front of your vehicle is on fire, you can drop this thing so the sand can, crash into the front of your vehicle and put it out. There's just I'm just like, I mean, they took 20 years to design these and build them and all of that, but just the technology here it's so cool. And the fact that it's all practically done is absolutely insane. And these aren't miniatures. These are full-sized vehicles. Like, this is crazy. But yeah, okay. Oh yeah, and then they shoot a harpoon into the steering wheel to try and pull the steering wheel off, and there's just all of these ideas where you can tell that these people have been fighting each other for a long time, and because of that, they've come up with all of these interesting and original and fascinating ways to outsmart the other person given the resources that they have, and I think that that's so cool. You get the idea that ammunition is limited, and so because of that, you have to be innovative in other areas.
The way they talk about the bullet farm, the bullet farmers, like, what is a bullet farm? Like, tell me. I want to know. How do you farm bullets?
Yeah. And even things like, again, the guitar player. And, I wrote down that when they're driving at night, everything is dark except the guitar player has a spotlight on him. It's so cool. It's just so cool.
It's so freaking cool. Yeah, the guitar player, he's just there for vibes. He's just setting the tone.
I love it so much. I'm trying to see if there's any other like culture things that I want to. We got the blowing the oil, the harpoons. Oh my gosh. There's one moment where, again, it's just these little things, you know, that just develop each individual character, even if they're a minor character. But there's this one guy who, towards the end, when he's climbing up onto the war rig, I think Furiosa's driving at the time, and you see the back of his head, there's just this little baby doll head attached to the back of his head.
Yes, I noticed that. Yeah.
It's like this guy never talks. We see him for like 3 seconds before he dies, but it's like, no, let's have him have a baby doll head on the back of his head, you know?
It's really horrifying.
It's so cool though. It's so cool. But yeah, and then just beyond that, I mean, things that look cool, like that sandstorm. I mean, come on.
Oh man.
Come on.
Oh.
When one of the vehicles gets swept up into the storm and you see it blowing up in the air and people are falling out of it, it's so cool.
I've expected to have like the face of a mummy in it, like in the Mummy.
Mm-hmm. And then I think it might be after the sandstorm or somewhere it happens where we have this shot and it looks like mountains, but then Max like slowly rises from the sand and you realize it's not mountains. It's actually him laying on the ground covered in sand.
That's when he and Nux, like, he crashes the car and they're like covered. Yeah.
Oh, it's just so good. And then just this whole arc, not really arc, but it lasts for so long. This whole concept of Max trying to detach himself from Nux, of like, okay, I have to cut this chain, and then I have to cut this thing off my head, and I'm attached to a door.
The incredible like 3-way, or really more, but because the wives also get involved. But it's Max fighting Furiosa, but then Nux will keep on like getting up and like joining in as well, and it's just, and the two of them are attached by a chain, and it's like, it's so well choreographed. And then the wives will step in and like try and pull one of them off of each other, and it's so good.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of establishing Max's character a little bit more too, I think that the way that he moves and the way that he acts, he's very animalistic. You know, you get this idea that he's just kind of, he's living off of instinct almost. And Tom Hardy's definitely doing the Bale voice, which I feel like he invented for Dark Knight Rises and then just loved and basically refused to stop doing. He loves to go to use the Bale voice, and it sounds so good. Wait, the Bale?
Sorry, Bane.
Oh, okay.
Why did Christian Bale? No, the Bane voice. Sorry.
Yeah, but we also get this shot of him here. You know, when he climbs out of the sand and he finds out he's still attached to Nux, you see him like basically unflinchingly pick up this gun, and he's willing to shoot his hand off, but the powder doesn't work. So then he literally bends over to chew it off. But then he notices that, you know, Furiosa and the wives are there, and he's like, oh, I could just walk over there. But the fact that he's like, I'm going to shoot his hand off. Well, if that doesn't work, I'll chew his hand off. And he's, you know, I just love how it establishes that he really is this person who just does whatever he has to do to survive. And because of that, he just like, he doesn't even think about it anymore. It's just instinct. He's like, well, it's an obstacle in my way, remove it, you know? So, but yeah, all that being said, I feel like we've talked a lot about Max, but I want to make sure we talk about Furiosa as well. Do you have any just like initial thoughts on her that you want to discuss?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, she is the movie. Like, it's hard to even like know where to start, because it's such a titanic performance. It's such a, you know, an instantly iconic character, instantly memorable. Her, like, I was just trying to, you know, watching this movie, obviously I know where it's going. I know that she is going to be the primary lead of this movie. Just wondering what it would be like to watch this movie in theaters, not knowing where it's going, and how long it spends kind of setting up her character as this really enigmatic figure. You're not really seeing her full on. She's got the shaved head that's, you know, the top half is covered in grease, which is such a cool look.
Such a cool look.
Amazing. And I love too, throughout the movie, this is only a side tangent, but just the sense you get of how everyone's out in the sand and the wind, and constantly things are getting rubbed off. And so, you know, she'll have the grease, and then she goes through an action sequence and the grease is mostly gone, and then she has to put it back on again. Like the little details like that. But anyway, yeah, just like you're kind of seeing her eyes, you're seeing, she's puts the wheel on the war rig. People are very deferential to her. And so you don't know, like, is she going to be kind of the main villain that Max is going to have to fight? And then the reveal that, oh no, she has her own agenda that she's been working on for a long time. And it's a selfless one of helping these wives to escape. I mean, helping herself to escape as well is just, it's such a great sort of, not subversion's not the right word, but this really unexpected place to take this character that is just so, instantly iconic and memorable.
Yeah, and she says at one moment, she says something like, I've worked all this time to get up to the point where I can drive a war rig, and this is the best opportunity that I'll ever have. And so you get this idea that she's been planning this for a long, long time,
Yeah. Well, the fact that when she first drives off course, the sort of head ward
leader, whoever.
the head of the he comes to her and is like, what's going on? Why are we going off course? And she just says, change of plans or something like that. And he instantly accepts it, new orders. Like, she has such a position of authority within them that they don't even question it until they start to realize that the important Joe's entire
even initially
army is out after them.
Initially when they start coming, he's like, oh, is that backup?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like, no, it's not backup.
They can't even consider the possibility that she might have gone rogue.
I love that for sure.
And obviously things like again with the costume design is so good, like her very practical beige outfit and her mechanical arm, and just the lore that instantly, thinking of how many battles she must have seen and the adventures she must have gone through in order to lose her arm and to gain this mechanical arm, and how well she knows the rig. There are all these little like weapons that she's hidden in it. She has all these little things that have been fixed up and kind of personalized that she can use, which is very cool. Like you just get this sense of this character who has been working in this environment for decades and has so much experience and so much respect. And then the fact that she has been planning this for so long is so freaking cool, And
I love how she just commands respect just by existing, and I think I love that moment when Max is in the war rig with her, and she kind of looks at him and she tells him. It just shows that they're this really great match, and also that he just respects her right away, and she respects him too. She's like, okay,
game recognized game.
She's like 1 2 1 2 red switch. You got it? He's like, yeah, I got it. It's like, okay.
I would have been like, can you give it to me one more time?
Yeah, exactly. But she's so on top of everything. And I love how, even at the end, we see her strength in the sense that she's been stabbed in the side and she's still driving and also holding Max while he's dangling out of the window. It's like, what? This is insane. But also too, one of the things I like about her is that, she's not this cold person. Like, she is very, very strong when she needs to be. I mean, she's always strong, but she's very like, let's push forward. Let's get it done. Don't think about it. Just go. There's that moment when it's like, did you see it? And he's like, she went under the wheels, and then she's like, well, we keep going. So she knows what she has to do in order to accomplish this mission, and she can put her personal feelings aside to achieve a larger goal. But then we also get these moments between her and Max, and there's this one moment when he asks her, or like, I forget what it is. Oh yeah, it's like Max asks Furiosa what the wives are looking for, and she says hope. And then he asks, what are you looking for? And she says redemption. And so it begs this question of redemption from what, And I think that that's something that is not explicitly stated in the film. Like, we don't know specifically what she's seeking redemption for, but we can kind of we can suppose what that is based off of what we know about her. And I think that there's this whole story behind her eyes of maybe she has regrets and things that she's had to do in order to get here, you know? Yeah, there's just layers and layers of depth to her. And this movie really is her film. And this movie really is a women empowerment film. You know, it's women can be small and tiny, but that doesn't mean that they're not powerful and strong and, you know, worthy of respect and all of that, you know?
Yeah, well, the other like sort of narrative arc through the film that I had not really remembered from my first viewing, but I was really struck by this time, is the transformation that the wives go through and how different they are. Like, you know, none of them, there's not a whole lot of time to give each individual one a whole lot of depth, but they are very much different people with different personalities, and the way that they react to their circumstances is very different. They kind of represent these different aspects of, you know, in certain ways they've led a very sheltered life. And so, you know, when they encounter like the many mothers toward the end, or even in their interactions with Furiosa, it's very clear, like, you know, they are kind of soft and sheltered in certain ways, but then also they have experienced this incredibly horrific trauma because they've been held as basically sex slaves by Immortan Joe for who knows how long. And so just that kind of dichotomy of their experience is so different from Furiosa. They're very ill-equipped, certainly, to, at the start of the film, to know how to handle themselves in these different situations. And sometimes she has to be kind of brusque with them, you know, kind of issuing orders. Like, you need to do what I say. You need to just listen to me when I tell you to do something, because I'm the only one who knows how to keep us alive. But then they all grow throughout the course of the film. And by the end, they are equal and active participants in the battle. And they're using their own strengths and the things that they've learned in different ways. And they keep Furiosa and Max alive. You know, they're incredibly indispensable to the final push into the Citadel. And yeah, I just really love that kind of the way that we're tracking their empowerment throughout the film, and the way that they're kind of throwing off the, you know, the shackles that Immortan Joe have left them in, and are finding ways for them to be strong with what they have.
Yeah, and I also love attaching that to, it's kind of like they gain more strength as they gain more hope, you know, and at the, well, not at the end, but when they reach the many mothers, or what's left of them, and they start learning about satellites in the sky, and they're like, do you think that there are people still out there sending shows? And it's like, well, I mean, maybe, but there is just this idea of there's something more that they could be living for. And then they start learning about plants and seeds and things like that. And they have this vision for a future that I don't think they had before. And so that gives them this motivation to really stay alive, you know, because we see earlier on, we see one of the breeders, as they call them, she tries to go back, you know, and she's like, it's okay, he'll forgive us. And they're like, no, remember, we made an agreement. We are not things. Like, we will not go back to him, you know? And by the end, none of them want to go back, you know?
Yeah. I love that moment where it's the same one, Cheeto, I think they call her. And she like, she goes to the big kind of captain, Rictus, I think his name is. She's like, take me. And you're like, oh no, girl, you've moved past that. But no, it was all a trap so that she could get close enough so that she could help the rest of them out with their plan. So yeah, it's growth. Character growth.
I love that moment too. That was a moment that I actually forgot about until I watched it this time. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. She goes back to them and pretends this, and then, you know, she takes over, and I thought that was really cool. But I also love too this idea of kind of this, I don't know if brainwashing is the right word, but lack of knowledge that is given to the young people, because, you know, we see that, like I said, you know, these the young women, they're learning about satellites and plants and things like that. And when they attach the war rig to the tree, Nux keeps calling it a thing. He's like, yeah, that thing.
The tree
it's
thing.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, no, that it's a tree, you know? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. You know, he doesn't even know what a tree is. And that's crazy. So there's just this idea that I think we also get a timeline too when we start talking to the many mothers. It sounds like the older woman did exist in the pre-apocalyptic world. So that gives us an idea of how much time has passed and how long they've been living in this world, which is crazy how much they've been able to establish this culture in seemingly maybe only like 30 or 40 years, maybe 50 years. I don't know. Everybody had a show back then. But and then
not wrong.
And then we get these cute little moments too between Nux and the redheaded one, whatever.
Capable.
Yeah.
And I love their little sort of quasi romance, but also just a sort of like, let's find friendship and let's, you know, I'm going to show you that you can be more than what you think, you know. Now it's like Nux's sort of moment of kind of complete disillusionment. It happens basically when it's like he feels like Immortan Joe has seen him fail, and that's the thing that kind of breaks him, right? Yeah, and that he's like, and then she comes along and is like, you need to stop defining yourself by this. There are other things that you can do. You know, you can be helping us and living for us. You know, and like her like giving him this sense of self and a sense of purpose that is apart from Immortan Joe, it like creates this bond between the two of them that is so sweet.
Yeah, it reminds me of, sorry, I'm gonna be weird, but it reminds me of that song from Wicked where it's like, what is this feeling so sudden and new? I felt the moment I laid eyes on you. What is this feeling? Looking at the plague doesn't have a name. Yeah. Although that's about loathing.
But they're singing about loathing, though.
I just got to that point. I'm like, wait a minute. That song is about loathing. Never mind.
Like, Tatum, I don't know what you're talking about.
Loathing. Unadulterated loathing.
For your face,
your hair, your clothing. Wow. Anyway. I totally forgot that song was about loathing. Anyway. Yeah. So, I just love talking about just the development of these characters because that's kind of what takes this movie beyond just an action movie, which I feel like we wouldn't even need any of the emotions in this movie at all, and it would still be incredible just visually and pacing wise and all of that. But the fact that we get this great character growth and development and world building is really just a cherry on top. And you know, we also see, as we see the wives grow, we see how Max's relationship with them changes, and you know, he gives the one wife a thumbs up, you know, when he sees what
I love that moment.
She then dies very quickly after, but there's this brief moment where you see him like a little bit of a smile, and he gives a thumbs up of like, you know what, I can get down with this, like, good job, you know. I just love seeing these friendships develop.
Yeah. And how that particular wife, let me look up the name of the character. The Splendid Angarad is what is listed in IMDb. But how you can sort of tell that she is kind of she's sort of the leader among them. She's kind of the most prominent and the most outspoken at the beginning. You know, probably a status that she gained because she was Immortan Joe's favorite. You know, this is kind of carried over from whatever social hierarchy existed.
She's the one who came up with the phrase, "We are not things." Because they say, like, remember, she said this, you know, we have to.
Yeah. And so her passing is, you know, the way that she's kind of is the first one to really step out of her comfort zone and assist Max and Furiosa in kind of doing all these physical actiony things in order to bring them to safety. And then when she dies, she kind of breaks open the floodgates in a certain way and kind of inspires the rest of them to really do more and more and more. And they're kind of doing it in her name, you know. Like I really love that character and the role that she plays within the story.
And you learn that she actually did survive going under the wheels
Oh
but
gosh. Yeah.
she's
Not for long.
but she's not gonna make it. So they're like, well, let's take the baby out, which definitely killed her in the process of doing that.
Oh yeah.
But then you learn that the baby's dead, and it's so nonchalant how this guy just like cuts her open, is like, yep, your baby's dead, and just like throws it on the ground. It's like, wow, this reality is very harsh and unforgiving to people that don't contribute anything to this world, you know? And yeah, and the fact that they're like so invested in, was it a boy, was it a son? It's like, well, what difference does it make? Seemingly all of your sons are weak and dying, so whatever. But yeah. Oh, I wrote down this one line that I really like, where when they meet the many mothers, and then Max kind of proposes turning around and going back, and one of the wives, I don't know her name, but she goes, "I thought you weren't crazy anymore." I love that line. Or no, I thought you weren't insane anymore. I thought you weren't insane anymore. And then another funny moment. I mean, obviously we have Nux, you know, referring to his tumors as Larry and Barry, but also when there's this one really sweet moment when Max and Furiosa are having their conversation in the front of the car, and then, or the war rig, and people in the back are kind of sleeping and whatever. And Nux kind of like, you know, is caressing what's her face, and then picks up a fly and just eats it.
He just eats it. Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. I mean, great vitamins.
Gotta get that protein.
Like, really
yeah,
good nutrients. Yeah. But there's just all these little hints that give you
little character building moments.
Of like, who is this guy? Like, how often does he do this? You know?
Yeah.
Does he do this?
Well, just the horrifying, like, to bring up the, you know, there's the comedy of like he has tumors named Larry and Barry, which is kind of funny. But he has this line where he's like, basically, they're gonna kill me if they're meaning these tumors are gonna kill me if I don't, you know, die in battle.
Yep.
Where it's like, he knows that he has a limited lifespan, and his whole, you know, this whole movie, what he's doing is trying to find some way to
make it to Valhalla,
make this shortened life. Yeah, make this shortened life that he has worthwhile. And so, you know, for all his life, he's been brainwashed into thinking that Immortan Joe is the road through it. But this movie is his transformation of being, you know, brought out of that and into something that is, you know, it is better and more human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like I need to mention the moment when Furiosa is like dying in the war rig, and then Max is like, okay, I'm going to stab her in the side so that she can, you know, breathe, which is a good idea to do. But then she starts losing all this blood because of what he did. And he's like, oh, okay, like take, you know, I'm a blood bag. I know I'm a universal donor. So like give her my blood. But then he looks at her, he's like, Max, my name is Max. Because she asks him earlier on in the film, what's your name? What do I call you? And he's like, does it matter? And then she says, okay, well, I'll just call you.
I'm going to call you
I'll
fool.
call you fool. Like, that's the signal. When I yell fool, drive the rig. And I think it just really shows this, how strong their friendship is, and how much she means to him, that, you know, as she's dying. And it's not just that he tells her his name. The look on his face when he tells her that is really just like, there is a genuine emotion there, and a genuine connection between these two people, and a trust that's been built so quickly. And I just think it's a really sweet moment. I'm glad that this movie has this moment, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's very much this sort of desperation, like, I can't let you die without you knowing who I am, you know? Absolutely.
So that's like literally all of my notes. So I don't know if there's anything else about, I still feel like we haven't talked about Furiosa that much, but I'm also like, what more is there to say other than she's an incredibly badass, amazing, cool warrior woman who has this really interesting past that kind of gives her this motivation to push so hard towards this goal and this hope. Like so much so that she's willing to ride 165 days in one direction, willing to see what's on the other side. You know, she just is so determined.
Yeah. Well, just the devastating moment of, you know, they finally made it to a landmark that she recognizes. She finds that some of her people are still left, and, you know, the sort of joy of that. And then, she's like, well, where's the green place? Like, let's go. Take me there. And that line, like, if you came from the West, you've already passed it. Like, it's such a, like, a quiet moment of devastation. And, the iconic and gorgeously filmed shot of her going out into the sand dunes and just kind of falling to her knees and kind of screaming, and you get that the lived reality of the fact that she was taken as a child, and since then every day she's dreamed of this moment, and realizing that it's the home that she knew is completely gone. It's devastating.
I feel like George Lucas could take a note from this film on the right way to have someone fall to the ground and shout, no. No. But yeah, I also like this addition of Furiosa not having a full arm. I think it's her left arm, because it really just communicates what has this woman been through in order to get here. I mean, maybe she was born not having a full arm, but I'm assuming she had a full one at one point, and it was,
it seems reasonable to assume given her profession.
Yeah, and so I just think that that's a really just wonderful addition to her. It just gives more backstory as to who she is and what she's been through, because clearly she's been through a lot, and that's really just helped develop her into who she is now. I was going to ask you, when you mentioned the shot of her kind of on her knees, I was going to ask you what your favorite shot of the movie was, but then I was like, that's kind of impossible, I feel like, to answer that question with this movie.
I feel like it's either that one or the crows in the salt place, honestly, just because it's so creepy and
it's cool. So cool. Yeah, I feel like for me, it's either that one or Max rising from the sand when he's buried in the sand, or the opening shot when he's standing there and eats the salamander lizard thing, or the harpoons when the people are, the drums, that, like, the score of the drums as those harpoons kind of, or not harpoons, the what do you call them, the those things that the people are standing on top of and they're swaying back and forth. What are those called?
I mean, I don't know if there's a real
pole
name
vaults?
For them. The pole vaults, yeah. The poles that they're on.
But just that shot.
Yeah. I mean, the first reveal of the Doof Warrior is just
so
kind of an
good.
all-timer.
Yeah, I mean, it's, oh, man. And the sandstorm, and I mean, like, this whole freaking movie, like, just all of it is so cool. This is a movie that I feel like, when my niece turns like 12, be like, okay, we're watching Mad Max Fury Road. And when my nephew turns 12, and be like, okay, now it's your turn. We're going to watch Mad Max Fury Road.
That's the nice thing about it being a soft R is, like, you don't have to wait till they're 17 to introduce them to it. You can maybe do it a little earlier.
It reminds me of The Matrix. Like, I think I saw The Matrix when I was probably 10 or 11, and I loved it because there isn't really, although, is that movie PG-13? I think it's rated R.
I think you're right. I think it's rated R.
But that movie was just kind of like, oh, this is so cool. But yeah, this movie's just fun for the whole family. Mad Max Fury Road.
Well, I don't know about that, but yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
Babies being untimely ripped out of their dead mother's stomachs.
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else to talk about? I mean, like, what else can be said?
Well, we also, I mean, I didn't want to talk about this until we're getting to the end of the conversation, but as seems like we're kind of getting there. The fact that the film ends with Max leaving and just sort of like quietly disappearing into the crowd, and then that kind of beautiful look between him and Furiosa where it's like, we understand each other, we respect each other, who knows if we're ever going to see each other again, but we've had this, incredible experience through it all, and we're kind of in a different place now than we were when we started. I don't know. I find it curious that he would decide not to stay, but I also find it very beautiful. You know, the fact that he is, again, very much an observer in this story. Like a whole sequel movie can and honestly should have been made about Furiosa trying to establish herself as the new and hopefully much more just leader of this little mini civilization. But Max is not going to be there to experience it. You know, he still feels this need to be off on his own. For whatever reason. I
think he has this feeling of like there's nothing more that I can do here. I've done all that I can. This is not my place. This is clearly something that Furiosa can handle and these wives and you know, I don't need to be here. You know, I don't belong here. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to end the film, kind of reinforcing those feminist themes of this man who helps them get here is like, that was my role, to help you get here. And now you guys can take care of yourselves, you know? And
yeah. Well, and it's a very, I mean, I feel like I say this a lot, but it's a very, you know, Western genre ending. You know, the loner who comes into town and uses his skills to help out and make a better world, but ultimately feels like he is too damaged or too beyond redemption, or is just incapable of living in this world that he's helped to create, and so he leaves, and that's the kind of the final shot. That's a very, you know, it's very The Searchers, it's very Shane, which I love.
Yeah I don't know either of those movies, but I believe you. But yeah, I also love seeing kind of this decision from the people to let them up, you know, like it is clear that this is the people's choice. It's not Furiosa coming back and being like, okay, I'm in control now, you know, because there is this sense kind of similar to what we were saying in the beginning. Furiosa does have respect of these people. So when she comes back, all of the, you know, white powdered people up top, you know, the
war pups,
yeah, you know, they are ready to receive her, you know, and it almost makes me wonder, have they all been waiting for Immortan Joe to die as well and for someone else to assume his place? And it just seems very clear that the people want her, you know, and I think that's super cool. I would want Furiosa to be the head of my government. I mean, yeah. That'd be awesome.
Furiosa for president.
Can we put her on the 2024 ballot? Let's get Furiosa on the ballot. We could write her in. Well, we both just write in the name Furiosa.
Imperator Furiosa.
That's a really great way to use my my right to vote. What if there's someone in this country named Furiosa? What if everyone wrote down Furiosa on their ballot and then we were like, oh, there's actually a person who lives here named Furiosa?
I feel like you could make a hilarious comedy about like actually that may have already been made. I feel like
probably
comedy about someone who unexpected who wins the presidency due to write-in votes.
Yeah, maybe Harry Potter's name being put in the Goblet of Fire.
Isn't that basically what Zelensky's TV show was about prior to becoming actual president?
I have no idea.
He like played a comedian who is accidentally elected president, and then he actually became president of Ukraine.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Fun fact.
Wow. Okay, cool. Yes. But to get back to your point, I like that ending moment as well. That little, nod between the two of them as, you know, as he fades into the crowd and she rises up into the sky and the drums build and, you know, it's so good. And I think the movie ends with another title card, I think, right? That says Mad Max Fury Road or no?
I think so.
Because I know there's one in the beginning after, you know, Max kind of goes through
in case you forgot what movie you're watching.
Yeah, after he like goes through this crazy run trying to escape and then he gets captured the final time. It's like, Mad Max Fury Road, blah, blah, blah. It's on fire. And it's like, wow. Man, this movie comes out of the gate like full tilt. 100 miles an hour. Oh, it's so good. This movie knows what it is and wants you to know what it is from the first second up until the last, and it accomplishes that tenfold. This movie is so good. If, in case anyone is wondering, on Letterboxd, I give this movie 5 stars. This movie is perfect. There's nothing about it that should be changed. Not only is it one of the best action films of all time, I do think it's one of the best films of the 21st century. Geneva, I know that you will 100% disagree with me on this, but this movie should have won Best Picture, in my opinion.
What one? Was this the Spotlight year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I love Spotlight.
It was, aside from Spotlight and Mad Max Fury Road, it was a pretty weak year, to be honest.
I remember it was, The Big Short was also up, which I do like.
It was The Big Short.
I don't remember
Revenant.
what else.
Revenant, Room, which I do like Room a lot.
That was a good movie. Yeah, these are all movies that are good,
right?
But not necessarily like that you would say is the best,
right?
Like, picture. You know,
I feel like Spotlight and Mad Max were like the two that were really one of these two should win in this year, and it should have been Mad Max Fury Road, in my opinion. But not saying that Spotlight is a bad movie.
I love Spotlight. We're probably going to do a Spotlight episode at some point on the pod. So yeah, no disrespect to Spotlight whatsoever, which I legitimately think is an incredible movie. But I could also see, like, I think there's a very strong argument to make that, you know, Mad Max is more of a, you know, it's a more sort of holistic, stretching the limits of what cinema can do. It's certainly a very, you know, long-lasting, iconic movie that has had a lot of influence through the way films are made and what stories get told and things like that. So I think there's a very strong argument to make, certainly, that it should have won Best Picture.
Being in the midst of Oscar season, I must just vent for a second and say that the Academy, as far as Best Picture nominations, let alone winning Best Picture, they very rarely recognize action films, comedies, animated films. Like, why
they tend to get so scared of genre, and
it's like, why was Into the Spider-Verse not nominated for Best Picture? Why, like, all of these, whatever. I'm not going to go on that tangent, but just to emphasize, the Oscars are not kind to movies that are not a specific type of drama. They have to be some sort of category of drama. It's like, don't get me wrong, I love dramas, but also movies can be fun too and be fantastic and worthy of recognition at a high level.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yep, I'm not going to disagree with you.
Well, we'll see what happens this year. Although I will say,
we are recording this the day before the Oscar nominations come out, so we'll see.
So I guess, speaking of awards, should we transition? Yeah. Is there anything else that you have to say here, or?
Nope.
I feel pretty good. This is just a really fun movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you've seen it, watch it again. This movie is so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, but as far as awards, this movie had 10 Oscar nominations, and like we said before, this movie swept. So this movie, the only awards that it didn't win that it was nominated for were Best Picture, Best Director, and Best I was going to say what won Best Cinematography? The Revenant.
Okay.
That's
okay.
That's
all right.
That's a hard competition.
Yeah,
I would not have been angry had either of them won, but yeah, that's a hard competition. So yeah, it was nominated but did not win Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Cinematography, but it did win Best Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Production Design. Absolutely every single one of them it deserved.
Oh, absolutely. But I do remember that there was one of the big topics of conversation this year was that Charlize Theron was snubbed for Best Actress, which I wholeheartedly agree with not having looked at the actual nominees.
I've got it right here. I've got it right here. So
who was it?
Brie Larson won, which she deserved.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, Cate Blanchett for Carol. Absolutely. But the rest of them, Jennifer Lawrence for Joy, that's a no. Saoirse Ronan for Brooklyn, that's fine. And then Charlotte Rampling for 45 Years, haven't seen it. But Charlize Theron should have been in there. Jennifer Lawrence did not need a nomination for Joy. I love J-Law. I'm a huge fan, but
she's great.
Did not need a nomination for Joy.
Yeah, I don't have any particular interest in seeing it.
She definitely should have been nominated, though. Charlize Theron. So, yes, as far as critical response, this movie has a 90 on Metacritic and a 97 on Rotten Tomatoes. Who does not like this movie?
I know. I'm like, who's the 3% contrarian?
I don't understand. But, yes, so I pulled 3 reviews that I will read real quick. So the first one is written by A.O. Scott from the New York Times, and they say, even in the most chaotic fights and collisions, everything makes sense. This is not a matter of realism. Come on now. But an imaginative discipline. And Mr. Miller demonstrates that great action filmmaking is not only a matter of physics, but of ethics as well. There is cause and effect. There are choices and consequences.
That's a really good quote, because we talked a little bit about the directing decisions in this movie, but I feel like we haven't put enough respect on just how good the action is. And for such a movie, you know, for a film that really relies on getting a lot of its pace and tone from lots of like frantic cuts, this is a very coherent, there's some really coherent set pieces where you can tell exactly where everyone is and what they are doing, even as it's utterly chaotic. And that's very difficult to achieve. Like, not a lot of films can really successfully pull that off. So, much respect to Mr. Miller.
Absolutely. Hats off to George Miller, as well as his co-writers and production designer
and his poor, long-suffering editor.
Honestly, yes.
Many snaps to her.
Honestly, kudos to everybody that helped make this film possible, because this is just incredible. Thinking about even just going down into other departments like, props and what goes into set dressing for production design. And kudos to everybody. All of you deserve awards. Crews should be represented, but they're not. It's fine. It's not fine, but there's nothing I can do about it. So, anyway, I'm not even going to get on that. So my next review comes from Alan Scherstuhl from The Village Voice, and he says, for all the ways the movie feels singular and impossible, like something the studios couldn't possibly have signed off on, Fury Road also feels entirely of its era. And
interesting.
I agree with that. Yeah, I'm still...
Do you know what... Do you know what he means by of its era?
Yes.
In the sense of like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
He meant in terms of the feminist messaging and women having the role that they have in this film, which I agree is something of this era, with the exception of James Cameron and a few movies. But yes. And then the last one that I pulled is written by Jamie Graham from Total Film. And he says, a lunatic vision, as hilarious as it is hellish, and some of the greatest action ever put on screen.
That's a very good way to sum it up.
Yes, absolutely. I wish I'd written it. So yeah, that brings us to the end. I feel very happy with this episode. This movie's awesome. It looks cool, and I love watching it. So, I guess that's just what I'll say about what this film has stuck with me. It's incredible. It's one of the best. Well, it is one of the most well-made movies in the history of cinema, in my opinion. It's incredibly rewatchable. It's a blast, pun intended. And this is a type of film where whenever it is re-released in theaters, I will probably go see it, because it is something to behold on a big screen. So, yeah. What about you, Geneva?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really, really glad that we did this and that I had a chance to see it again. It is, it's not entirely my vibe, but, it is fantastic, and I'm really glad that it exists. I'm really glad that it was able to, I think it really helped in some ways to show how viable action films led by a woman can be. There are, it obviously wasn't the first to do that, but I think it was a big sort of push in that direction that has just kept going in recent years, which has been awesome to see. And yeah, I was really, like I said before, moved unexpectedly by the journey that Nux goes through and the wives go through. That message of empowerment, I think, is fantastic, and I hope that it'll be playing on a theater near me sometime soon, because I really would love to see it in that big screen experience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
I'm curious to see how Furiosa is. I do not have high hopes.
Yeah.
The trailer does not look good to me, but who knows?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same, but people doubted George Miller for 20 years
Yep.
as he was making this film. So
Yep.
who knows? We'll see.
I don't entirely doubt directors anymore, because some people you just gotta
never know.
trust. You just gotta trust them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Geneva, what are we going to be talking about next week? Do you want to make up something on the spot? Because I changed the order.
Oh, right. That's right. Sorry. Wait, let me look up. So is it just a blank space right now? Okay. Well, why don't we do Born Yesterday? Okay. All right. So next week, we are going to be talking about a longtime favorite of mine, which is a comedy from the early 50s called Born Yesterday. Yeah. Excited to talk about it.
Have not seen it, so we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll like it. I feel like there aren't many. I feel like there are comedies that I like that you don't like, but I don't think you've ever liked a comedy that I haven't liked. So,
Oh, that's good to know.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be good. Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week for our Mad Max Fury Road episode. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time. I have to whisper this, I feel like, because if I actually shout it, I just feel like
How do you whisper this quote?
I don't know. I think I just need to not be full on Tatum loudness. Otherwise, the windows might shatter.
Just blow out our levels.
Although that would communicate the energy of the movie. So. Okay, I'm going to do my best. Witness me, blood bag. I love it.
Just picture me in the background playing an electric guitar atop a giant
I feel like I need
car.
I feel like I need the chrome prop,
Yeah.
This movie is so outrageous. I love it. Okay.